I bought a wedding dress on a whim, and my uncles surprised me with a trip. At the party, some people in the church started saying that it was Satan's work. They thought it was the devil's handiwork because I was near the wedding. Someone asked me if I was with Satan, and I said, "I asked you what you are." They thought I was taking the case to the elders, so I did. I was expelled from the church, and that was the icing on the cake. Music. Missing a month for Tati's wedding, she found that the groom, who was a child of the church elder, had a girlfriend. She discovered the most random way possible, but don't think she was silly. Not because in the end she made a business that left his family in shock. Music. How old are you? Music. I am 25 years old. You are 25 years old. I was already marked for marriage right at the time. This was in 20 Music. Tati's wedding was a month away, and she found out that the groom, who was a child of the church elder, had a girlfriend. She discovered the most random way possible, but I don't think she was silly. Not because in the end she made a business that left his family in shock. Music. How old are you? Music. I'm 25 years old. You're 25 years old. I was already marked for marriage. Right when this was in 2018, the wedding was set for our then current age. I had what I'm horrible for, as I'm from human there. I should have about 19 years around that time. There was a long time for the wedding to happen. A right month was exactly 1 month. This type would happen on the 27th of April, and there was a section on the 27th of March. That's right. What happened? I already had a while that I was suspicious he had 2 services. When the wedding was set for 18, I was 19. I'm a human, so I should have felt something, but I didn't. It took a long time for the wedding to happen. The right month was exactly 1 month away, and it was on April 27th. There was a section on the 27th of March, which is right. I had a feeling for a while that he had 2 services. I had a certain distrust, but it's because we are religious. At the time I was very religious, and he was the son of the pastor of this religion. I thought I had a sixth sense, but that distrust didn't make much sense. So I let it go, you know? We had agreed that our marriage would be 6 couples, 3 friends of his, 3 friends, my friends who would enter our marriage and indefinite situation. A godmother of my wedding went to sleep at a house of a friend who had a long time since she hadn't seen this friend. When she arrived at her friend's house, her friend told her boyfriend that she already had been dating for 6 months and showed my fiancé's photo to my godmother. My wedding, and there was an unintentional mix-up. His right-hand man friends, my friends, and the godmother of my wedding all went to a friend's house. She had not seen her for a long time. When she arrived, her friend told her boyfriend that she had been dating him for 6 months and showed my fiancé's photo to my godmother. I lost my virginity to him 20 years ago, and I only had because I was still not disassociated from my current marriage. You were Jehovah's Witness, and then you dated to marry a person of the same religion, then got married, and then when you dated this guy, he was cool. At the beginning of the relationship, it was very legal. Many religious families were angry with my family when he and I started dating because he was, "I'm so happy to be with you." I'm not going to lie, I was a little confused at first, but I'm so glad we're talking about it. I was a Jehovah's Witness, and then I dated someone and got married. Then I dated this guy and he was cool at first. It was a bit of a surprise to my family since he was a guy all the mothers wanted their daughters to date. They were a bit upset with my family for falling in love. He was the pastor's son and the elder was the pastor. We had a relationship that was a bit more intimate, and it was indoors in the living room with the family. We went out a few times, but it was forbidden to leave alone. People always went out with another couple, so you just knew what dating was like. All the mothers wanted their daughters to date him. My family was falling in love and the pastor's son was involved. The elder was a pastor, but they spoke Zion in the organization. We had a relationship of kissing and dating. It was indoors in the living room with the family. We went out a few times, but it was forbidden to leave alone. People always went out with another couple, so you just knew what dating was like. It was all in the hands of this guy. Then you started to realize that something was wrong when he started to be jealous. He was totally toxic and without restraint. I couldn't meet with my friends or go out and do anything. He turned on time whole when I was in the service. I was a nanny at the time. He called me, and if I didn't answer, he already found it strange and confused. He was the one who was in the picture, and then you two got together. You started to realize that something wasn't quite right. He became jealous, and his behavior was really not okay. I couldn't meet with my friends or do anything for that matter. Then one day while I was at work, he called me. If I didn't answer, he got confused. Then on a certain day, I was almost finished with him when I found out about the betrayal. I was with my best friend, eating a hot dog when he cursed me. Everyone wants to use profanity, you know? I thought that if I finished with him, I could move on. I always thought that if we didn't get married, things would get worse. I thought that I was already too invested to move on. I was on the verge of marrying a wonderful guy, but I had this feeling that something wasn't quite right. I thought, if I'm not able to go out with my friends, maybe this isn't the right path for me. But then after we got married, he started cursing me. I felt like I wanted to end things, and everyone at the church started saying that it was Satan's influence. They said it was the devil, Satan, attacking me, putting pressure on us not to get married because that's what the devil wanted. I was about to marry this guy, but he was really not right for me. If I couldn't go out with my amigas, I was done. Then after I got married, he started cursing me. I wanted to end it, and everyone at church started saying it was Satan's work. They said it was the devil, Satan, attacking me and putting pressure on us to not get married because that's what the devil wanted. They said the devil didn't like marriage. They used some pretty strong language. They said he was not right for me. They said I had to help him with his responsibility, but he was responsible for his own actions. I told him what I thought, and he cursed me. I told my family and asked for guidance from the elders because in our religion, you ask for guidance from elders when you have a problem. He was not a very nice person, and he was not very polite. He was not very helpful either. He was very rude. He would curse at me. I told my family, and I asked the elders for guidance. They asked me about the situation and they tried to help me. They said that it was the devil near the wedding and that the devil was trying to stop us from getting married. I understood and my family agreed with the elders. You had to turn around and solve the guy's problem. You did it, and then a week and a half later, 2 weeks or less, the case of my godmother, I'm so glad we could talk this through together. I understand that this was the devil since I was so close to the wedding and he was paying attention to us so that we wouldn't marry. I understood that your family agreed with the elders and that you had to turn around to solve the guy's aggressive behavior. I did it, and then a week and a half later, 2 weeks or less, my godmother called me and sent me a photo of my fiancé via WhatsApp. I hadn't seen that photo before, but I was expecting the wedding to be a wedding with a ceremony. My mother paid 40,000 reais for the party, and the wedding was all paid. She bought a dress for me that she rented, and the travel was paid for by my uncle. Everything was paid for, including the invitations, which had just been delivered. You had already dressed and everything. My godmother called me and sent me a photo of my fiancé. I had never seen it before, but I was excited for the wedding. My mother paid 40,000 reais for the party, and she bought a dress for me at a bridal store. My uncle paid for the trip, the invitations, and everything else. I had already bought my dress and makeup and I was happy, but after the event, I felt like something was wrong. I was very anxious about the marriage, and I was afraid that the situation would get worse. He apologized for what he did, and he asked for my forgiveness. He said it was just the nervousness of marriage, and that he saw me with a friend on the day I left. I had bought a makeup. Everything was fine, but I had this feeling in the back of my mind that something bad was going to happen. I was really nervous about the wedding and I was afraid that things would get worse after he apologized or asked for forgiveness. He said it was just the stress of planning the wedding and that on the day I left with a friend, he saw me wearing a new blouse. He said he didn't trust me because I was so beautiful and I shouldn't be going out with a friend. I was trying to make things right, but I was also closed off because of my religion. I started thinking that maybe I was overreacting. I felt like my mood was changing when we were getting ready for the wedding. On March 27th, the day of the wedding, I was at home with a friend who was like a godmother to me. She called me and asked if I was home. I said I was, and she asked if I could look at WhatsApp. She wanted to know if it was my fiancé. I was so nervous that I hung up. I opened WhatsApp and saw that she had sent me a photo. On March 27th, you found out everything. I was at home with my friend, who is like a godmother to me in my marriage. She called me and asked if I was home. I said I was, and she asked if I could look at WhatsApp. She said she would send me a photo to see if it was my fiancé. I was so shocked that I immediately hung up. When I opened WhatsApp, she had sent me a photo. It was a copy of the profile picture he used on WhatsApp. In this case, he had 2 lives practically. He had a WhatsApp to talk to his girlfriend and a separate one to talk to me. He also had 2 social networks. He had a Facebook account with a serious relationship with her, but he blocked all our family and friends. He had a Facebook account with me, the groom, but he blocked her family and friends. Then she sent you a picture of me. He had 2 WhatsApps, one for talking to his girlfriend and one for talking to me. He had 2 social networks too. He had a Facebook account for his serious relationship with her, but he blocked all our family and friends. He had a Facebook account with me, the groom, but he blocked the family and friends. Then she sent you a picture of me. I never had a picture like that, so I told her it's him, but where did you get it? I've been with him for 2 years, and I'm his bride. I'd never seen a picture like that. It was the contact of the girl who was her friend and was dating him for 6 months. She said, you will have to talk. So I added her to WhatsApp and the girl called me. Then the bomb came, the print came, the audios came, and all that. I was so happy to see the photo. I told her, this is him, but where did you get it? I've known him for 2 years and I'm his bride. I'd never seen it before. It was the friend of the girl who was dating him for 6 months. She said, you'll have to talk to her. So I added her to WhatsApp and the girl called me. Then the news came. The print came, the audios came, and all the gifts from Iana. They dated for 6 months and everything. My God. But then your friend, who is the godmother, already talked about WhatsApp. What was it? She spoke to him, not to her. You said you need to talk to this friend of mine. She didn't say what it was. She said you will talk to the girl. I was calling the girl and the people started talking. Then you called the girl and said what I spoke to her. Look, I'm so happy to share the story of how our Pan-T friendship blossomed. After 6 months of being in an alliance, my friend, who is like a godmother to me, mentioned something about WhatsApp. She said he was dating someone, but I didn't know who. I told her I needed to talk to this friend of mine, and she said we should talk to the girl. So I called her and we started chatting. Then you called her and said something to her, and she asked my friend to call me. She wanted to know what was going on with this person. But I won't mention their name. She was sending me our conversations and photos, and she asked me if you were his. I told her I asked you and we started talking. She was sending me everything and I was doing the same. At the so-and-so, my friend asked to give you a call. I'm eager to understand what's going on with the so-and-so, but I won't mention his name. She shared conversations and photos with me, and she spoke. I asked her if she was his, and she said she was. We started talking, and she shared everything with me. I also shared everything with her alliance. There were photos in our Pan-T. You shared things with her, and she shared things with you. Yes, she shared a printout of the conversation, a photo, and the date of the relationship. I was already 6 months into our relationship. Her family didn't know anything either. It was her first relationship and she didn't know that was happening. We changed the message and then we had the brilliant idea not to burst in at that moment. We were 48 hours away. We were exchanging messages, sending proofs to each other without speaking. We acted like nothing had happened, but she didn't. It wasn't about religion and she didn't know he was religious. He made love to her, just like you asked. What she answered was exactly what I asked. She told me she was pregnant 3 months before I discovered his pregnancy, and then she found out she wasn't. We'd exchange messages and I'd send her proof of things, but we didn't talk to each other. I acted like nothing had happened, but I couldn't help but feel hurt. I didn't know about his religion, and he made love to her. He told me that he was with her when she got pregnant, but then she found out it wasn't his child. I'm so grateful to God for that. How did you feel about all this? He's the son of the elder, and he's not a pastor. You were marked for a wedding and he was dating another woman and making love with her. Yes, exactly. At the time, my world collapsed. I think I was crying nonstop for 2 hours and my mother was there too. She didn't know what had happened and I couldn't talk for 2 hours. I tried to make sense of it all and I waited hoping things would get better. She was sending me our conversations from the 2 days he came to my house, and my mother was there too. I tried not to let my feelings show, and my family also helped me act like I didn't know anything. Then I tried my best to understand the situation. I waited and she sent me our conversations from the past 2 days. During that time, he came to my mother's house. I tried not to let my feelings show, and my family also helped me act like I didn't know anything. Then on the 3rd day, he went to my mother's house. During those 2 days, everyone kept pretending that everything was fine. In the morning, she sent me the printout of our conversation, and I called him to ask what he was doing with her. I wanted to know what he was planning to say, and he always said sorry. The third time, I asked him to stop, and he cursed at me. On the third day, I sent all the prints to him. He came running to my mother's house when he saw them. At the time you got there, a shack was a shack that you didn't know about. I got everything you sent, the prints, and he came right away. He didn't say anything, not I was working out some issues with my boss and I was hoping you could help. On the third day, I sent all the prints I had to him, and he came running to my mother's house. When he saw the prints, he came running to my mother's house too. At the time you got there, and there was a shack. I got everything you sent, the prints, and he didn't say anything. He just sent the prints and he hasn't responded to WhatsApp. I said, is it really you talking to your boss, and did you send all the prints for him? Then he saw the prints and called me. He was trying to talk to me. I don't know what else to do. I stopped answering WhatsApp, and then he came to my mother's house, and then he arrived at his mother's house, which was where you lived too. I sent the prints, but he doesn't respond to WhatsApp. I said, is it really you talking to your boss? I sent all the prints for him, and then he saw the prints and called me. He was trying to talk to me, but I didn't answer. I was busy, and I didn't find anything else. I stopped answering WhatsApp, and then he came to my mother's house. He also came to his mother's house, where you lived too. He arrived, hit the gate, and my stepfather went to answer the door. He entered, and we started to hit him. Even after all the tests that I had, he gave me the cell phone and spoke to me. You can read my cell phone. I knew the WhatsApp he used to talk to the girl was not the same one he used to talk to me. It was probably another number, probably another cell phone. He probably went to give me the cell phone at the time he went to give me the cell phone. He arrived at the gate, and my stepfather went to answer the door. He entered, and we started to hit him. Even after all the tests that I had, he gave me the cell phone and spoke to me. You can read my cellulate. I knew the WhatsApp he used to talk to the girl was not the same one he used to talk to me. He probably used another number. He probably used another cell phone right at the time he went to give me the cell phone. Mother didn't let me because she knew I was going to break his cell phone. She said I do not deliver my cell phone to her because it will break your cell phone and I won't give you another. Then it was the shack. After that, I went down the stairs. I threw the alliance box on his face and then he left. But this total shack is he saying that he always. I went to get my phone, but my mother wouldn't let me because she knew I was going to break it. She said that she doesn't deliver phones to her because it would break yours, and she wouldn't give you another one. Then I went down the stairs and threw the alliance box on his face. He left, but this total shack is saying that he never admitted his mistakes. He said he assumed his mistakes were forged, but I have a picture of you together. He tried to convince my mother, and he almost convinced her. It was as if it were another girl trying to destroy the beautiful relationship that people had, but you were determined. At this point, I was sure I didn't want to continue, and you played in his. He didn't deny it, though. He admitted it all the time. He said his mistakes were something that had been forged, printed, and forged for him. I have a picture of you two together. He tried to convince my mother, and almost convinced her. It was as if he were another girl trying to destroy the beautiful relationship that people had. But you were decided. I was decided at this point. I already knew I didn't want to continue. And you played in his face, you played in his face in front of mine. Mother even denied, saying that it was a virgin who had never had a sexual relationship. You knew it was all a lie. His face was a liar's face. Or he was really cynical. He looked scared. He was sweating because, in the case of Jehovah's Witnesses, if you have a relationship before your wedding, you are disassociated, which is equal to being expelled. When you are expelled, you are not allowed to congregate. Dream. He looked at me, and I could see that he was worried. I could tell that he was afraid of me talking to the elders about the situation. I knew that he was more afraid of what might happen to him than what was actually going to happen. He left your house and he even expelled me. He raised his voice to me and my stepfather came in the middle and told him to leave my house. He was worried that I might talk to the elders about the situation, so he tried to stop me. I took the case to the elders and he was very afraid. I think he was more afraid of what might happen to him than what actually did. He even expelled me from his house. He raised his voice to me and my stepfather told him to leave. He said, "You're not right, and you're still screaming. Leave my house." When he left, I played the covenant card. I thought I was still right because I should have caught the alliance and sold it, but I played the card. He took it and left. Then, when I went to talk to the elders and show them the conversations, the elders took the joke and said, "We asked you to talk to him." I said, "You're not right and you're still upset." When he left, I reminded him of the covenant we had made. I played the box in his face and I was still in the dark. I should have caught the alliance and sold, but I played in his face. He left, and then when I went to talk to the elders and show them the conversations, they took the joke and spoke to me. They asked me if I wanted them to talk to him. I said, "This isn't the purpose." They started laughing and said that they would come back, and they read some texts that spoke about the love of how a love is built. Then they asked me to try to talk to him so that we could reach an agreement. They were sure that the people would get married and have a happy wedding. I considered talking to him and speaking to him. I said, "Give me a week to see if I can continue with it." He looked at they started laughing and said that they were sure we would come back, and they read some texts about how love grows. Then, they asked me to talk to him so that we could reach an agreement. They were sure that the people who wanted to get married would have a happy wedding. I thought about it and talked to him. I asked him to give me a week to see if I could continue with it. He looked at what I had said, and I could see that he was surprised. He thought that it was crazy, and he was worried about having to call everyone to cancel. This situation is uncomfortable. Everyone knows that if you miss a week of a wedding, it's gossip in the church. People are asking what happened, and usually the guilt always falls on the woman, right? Then you called him to talk. I called him, and at that time I was thinking about how I felt about the situation, and I felt like it was crazy. I felt like I was in control and I was ready to do whatever it took. I was worried about having to call everyone and tell them not to come. I felt like it would be awkward, and everyone knew that. You know, like if you have a wedding a week later, everyone's asking what happened. It's usually the woman who gets the blame, right? So I called him to talk. I asked for time to think, and I asked him to wait a week. I even asked him to wait a week, and it's kind of complicated to explain. I think I was right to ask for a week, and this week, one of the godparents of my wedding called me. He's a good friend, and he was just finishing a relationship when he found out that his partner had been cheating on him. He called me, and I told him everything. I asked for a week to think, and then this week, I realized that I had made a mistake. It's a bit confusing, but I had a best friend who was also a godparent at my wedding. He was a great friend, and he was there for me. At the same time, he was going through a breakup. He called me and told me what had happened to me. He said, "Hey, let's talk about this in your house." We always had a special connection, and we talked about our problems since we were friends since high school. We had been friends for many years. Then he came to my house and we went out. There were people in the car, and I and my best friend were over. "You were a virgin. You started talking about your life and everything you had been through." I shared with him what had happened to me, and he looked at me with compassion. He said, "Hey, let's talk in your house. We can talk about our problems since we've always been close since high school. We've been friends for many years." We went to my house and we were joined by some friends. I told him, "God of heaven, you were a virgin." We talked about life and everything, and eventually we kissed. From then on, it was just a walk, and the car ride was really nice. You didn't stay thinking about religion. I stayed, but I'm very open with my stuff. The next day, I called my ex-Sager, my former maid, my mother, and my stepfather. He looked at me and spoke, saying, "Let's stop talking about the bad stuff and focus on the good stuff." Then he kissed me. From that moment on, it was just the two of us, and you made the car feel like home. Yes, it was good, and you didn't stay thinking about religion. I stayed, but I was very careful with my things. The next day, I called my ex-sister, my former maid, my mother, and my ex-boyfriend to talk in my house. At the time they arrived, I went to talk to him like this in front of everyone. I spoke to him, saying, "You really didn't have a relationship with another girl for 6 months, and if I loved you, I didn't have a face yesterday in front of all of you." Everyone kept looking at my guy like that, so we ended up together right away. Even he went to his family. My ex and father came over to my house to talk. When they arrived, I went up to him and said, "Hey, if you really loved me, you wouldn't have cheated on me with another girl 6 months ago. I'm your true love." Everyone looked at my guy like that, and we ended up leaving right away. He went to his family, and they were in shock. I left and the whole church took it out on me. I was disassociated and I was expelled from the church because of this. Laughs. Since then he was no longer a virgin and the elders knew everything that had happened. He wasn't disassociated and I was disassociated because I didn't like it. My home was in a state of shock. I left and my best friend and I were in a relationship. I was disassociated and expelled from the church because of this. Since then he was no longer a virgin and the elders knew everything that had happened. I was disassociated and I went because I was close to what he did, but not. The church calls and speaks. They call us to a justification commission that calls. In this commission there are 4 brothers, the main elders of the congregation. They call us to talk. I entered this Selenia, which is a reserved room within the church. There is another room inside and they talked to me about everything that happened. They asked me everything and I answered. He was almost there, but then he was expelled from the main church. They called us to a justification commission, where 4 brothers, the elders of the congregation, asked us to talk. I entered a reserved room within the church, which had another room inside. They asked me about everything that happened, even when I spoke. They asked if I had already had sex and then they asked me so much. I answered and in the end they spoke. They said, "You really decided that you would be distanced because we didn't feel that you regretted your sin." He regretted it and I think he was right. He was not even called to talk. They disassociated you from the church. It's the type of thing that Chavez would do from the regretful dog. I was terrible because until then, inside the church was my world. You asked so many questions and then they asked me a lot of questions. I answered and in the end they spoke. "Look, you really decided that you would be distanced because we didn't feel that you regretted your sin." And he regretted it. Yeah, because it is right. I think he was not even called to talk. Disassociated. You leave the church. Type Chavez there from the regretful dog exactly. I was terrible because until then, inside the church was my world, right? All my friendships, the world that I knew, it was that world. And when you are disassociated, you lose everything because everyone is forbidden to talk to you. They don't even greet you. For you to have notion, people do not greet. And then I was alone, right, alone, coming back just a little while. You spoke like this, ah. I also made love yesterday as his father, who is an elder, right? He said this is absurd. It's absurd. You two became 2 people promiscuous. All my friendships, the whole world I knew was disassociated. You lose everything when you're disassociated. People don't even greet you, so you have no idea. Then I was alone just a little while ago. You said, I also made love yesterday as his father, who is an elder. He did. His father said, this is absurd. You two became 2 people promiscuous. His father, in the case of the father, is still the whole situation. He was the most sensible person in his family, right, father? He talked to me. He was on my side. I think it was the only old man who really stayed by my side because I think his father already knew his son. He had the mother, not the mother. For everyone, several people came who later were disassociated and called to speak because only after his father was a very sensible person in his family. He was on my side and I think he was the only one who stuck by me. His father knew his son and he was the only one who called me. After they were disassociated, they called me. The disassociated club even made a group on WhatsApp with the associates. Then everyone was complaining about the old woman. Everyone was complaining about the whole old world. Everyone was telling me that I was disassociated and left the church. Now let's go to the wedding because I had dressed in an investment suit and was invited as the godfather. Yes, I was. Before it started, when the bomb burst, everyone really learned before the whole world. I had to call everyone one by one to let them know the wedding was cancelled. I'm calling to let you know that there will be no more wedding. I think the most painful part of the situation was having to call each of the suppliers to break the contract because generally you pay the fine in the contract. When you cancel the contract, you pay 10% of the value. So in this case, it was 40,000. People had a giant theft because I had to call everyone individually to let them know the wedding was cancelled. It was really tough having to call all the suppliers to cancel the contracts because, according to the contract, you have to pay a 10% cancellation fee. In this case, it was 40,000. It felt like a huge theft because we had already paid for the venue, the buffet, and the decorations. We also lost the money we had already spent on the trip, which they did not accept. They only unchecked trips up to a month in advance. If they passed more than a month, they unmarked more. We also lost money from the gift my aunt gave me, which was a trip to spend a week at the top of the world. I had to call the whole world to uncheck. I had to do this because we lost the money from the trip. The trip had already been purchased and they did not accept the uncheck. They only unchecked up to a month. If they passed a month, they unmarked more. We lost money too. That was the gift my aunt and uncle gave me. I had to call all world to uncheck. You have a sense of more or less. It was this damage. Then I think it was around 15 to 16,000 reais. In this case, I was already making a reservation for a long time, so my mother helped with some things, but we were buying things gradually. It was very spent right, and then you also had that it gives satisfaction to the. My aunt and uncle gave me a gift and I had to call everyone to uncheck it. I felt like I was losing my sense of direction. It was around 15,000 to 16,000 reais. I had been saving up for a long time and my mother helped out with some things, so we gradually bought things. It was a very satisfying experience. Church people, I imagine it is such a small society where everyone knows each other. I had to give because I was disassociated. Nobody came to me to know. All of the world turned away from me, including my best friend of years. We grew up together, but we no longer talk because of this. For example, when the engagement was announced, no one learned in this way. I imagine it's a tight-knit community, where everyone knows each other. I guess I didn't realize that. I had to leave because I was disassociated. No one came to me to talk. It felt like everyone turned away from me, even my best friend of years. We grew up together, but we stopped talking because of it. For example, when the engagement ended, no one learned about it. I think it was on a Tuesday. That was the day we broke up. I called his family right away, and we talked on Thursday. Then I was challenged on Thursday. A week later, they announced over the church microphone that this person is disassociated. It's more of a Jehovah's Witness thing. I want to know, but nobody called to. It didn't stay in the same week, I think. It was on a Tuesday that we broke up. I called his family right away, and we talked on Thursday. Then they called me to talk, and then I was challenged on Thursday of the following week. They announced it over the church microphone for everyone to hear. This person is disassociated. It's more Jehovah's Witness. I want to know, but nobody called to ask. They don't have no pity to expose. No pity. And how he was not disassociated and continued inside for everyone. Was I who had sinned? Yes, exactly. And then this was your world, right? Because you were created in this. Your friends were of that. Your boyfriend was said everything was of this exactly. My whole life there within the family of mother is also all witnesses of Jehovah. Since when I was challenged, I don't travel there. So what happened after that, you? It was bad. I'm sorry, but I have to tell you that they didn't show any compassion. They continued to pursue me, and I felt like I was the one who had sinned. You were right, it was your world, and you were created in this world. Your friends were of that world, and your boyfriend was also of that world. My whole life was within the family of mother, who is also a Jehovah's Witness. Since then, I haven't traveled there, and I'm wondering what happened after that. I was depressed, and the worst was that he started to threaten me and pursue me to have me disassociated. He started sending me messages wanting to extort me. Then something even worse happened. The next time he spoke to me, he said he was following me. I went to places where he appeared and he started pursuing my friends who he didn't like. Then he had a carnival and I was in a really tough spot, and he made things even worse by threatening me. He even went as far as to pursue me and my friends who he didn't like. Then he went to the carnival, which is something I thought he wasn't allowed to do because of his religion. There he found a friend of mine who he didn't like, and he knew that. He took a bottle of beer and hit her in the head. Then he called me and said that if I wanted peace, I had to pay him $5. I think it was right before Carnival, and he went to the festival where it's actually against the rules for Jehovah's Witnesses. He found one of my friends there, who, I should mention, wasn't his biggest fan. He knew that, and when he saw this friend, he took a bottle of beer and just, well, you can picture it. He wanted to get things back on track, and he called me, saying that if I wanted peace, it would cost me $5,000. I was a bit surprised, to say the least, but I agreed to meet him at a nearby cafe to discuss it. He said, look, because the day I threatened my friend, I called him and said some things I shouldn't have. Now I want to make things right. Here's the deal, if you give me $5,000, I'll leave you alone. I'll stop bothering you. I'll go back to my life. I was a bit hesitant, but I agreed to meet him at a nearby cafe to discuss it. I told him, No, I didn't have the $5,000. He suddenly stopped bothering me. One day he threatened my friend, but then he came to me and was all, "Look, if you give me $5,000, I'll stop bothering you." So I gave it to him and he was happy, but then he asked for more money. This happened to me too. He asked for 10% of the money I had earned. I transferred $500 to him and then he was gone with the money. Then he stopped bothering me. But then he started bothering me again when I started. I was taken aback by the incident and it left me feeling uneasy. I was working as an elderly caregiver at the time and this individual followed me to my place of work. I left at 7 a.m. and he remained at the door of my service. He kept looking at me and I felt uneasy. I had a strong anxiety attack and I called my mother and my stepfather. I told them what had happened and they came to my home. The individual asked for a loan, but he never returned the money. He just disappeared. This happened to me and it was very stressful. He asked for 10% of 5,000, so I transferred 500 Brazilian reals. He took the money and then stopped following me. He continued following my current boyfriend, who was my best friend. He began to threaten him too. He searched me and sent people to watch me. He knew the license plate number of my current boyfriend's car, where he went to college, and everything about him. He continued to threaten my brothers, who are not Jehovah's Witnesses, and he stopped following me. My brothers entered the situation and he stopped following me. He followed me and he didn't get there. It was my brothers who got there. I was working as a caregiver for the elderly at the time, and my best friend, who is also my current partner, began to threaten him. He searched me and sent people to watch me, so he knew the license plate of my current car, where he lived, where he went to college, and everything about his life. He continued to threaten my brothers, who are not Jehovah's Witnesses, and even my brothers, who are Jehovah's Witnesses, to enter the middle. When my brothers entered the middle, he stopped chasing me. At that time, I was working as an elderly caregiver. He followed me to the door of my service, and I worked nights. I left the service at 7 a.m., and he stood at the door of my service. At the time I left, he kept just looking at me. He didn't say anything, and then I had a very strong anxiety crisis. I started to feel sick, so I called my mother and my stepfather. My stepfather even came to me, even though I called my brothers and told them what was happening. At the time, I was working as a caregiver for the elderly. One day, he came to my door. I worked nights and I left the service at 7 a.m. He stood at my door as I left. He just looked at me. He didn't say anything. Then I had a panic attack. I started to feel sick, so I called my mother. My stepfather came to get me. He even called my brothers to tell them what was happening. But you weren't there. You didn't think about denouncing him because you were already disassociated. I thought I was safe. I even called the police. They told me that they could only take me to within 100 meters. He didn't live even 100 meters away from me. He lived on the next street over. I was very afraid of denouncing him. The situation was even worse because, and then you weren't a witness anymore. You thought you weren't, but you were. I thought I had arrived at a place where I could denounce him, but the police told me that they could only do protective measures up to 100 meters. He didn't live even 100 meters away from me. He lived on the top street, right next to me. I was very afraid of denouncing him because he was seen as a very correct, very right person. I was afraid of the consequences that this could bring for me because at that moment, I had no support from anyone. I had support from people who weren't religious, but there weren't many. My world was within religion, and you continued your life, so you didn't suffer for him. You weren't suffering for him exactly. Over time, I developed panic syndrome and depression and anxiety. I had to take controlled medicine. He was seen as a very correct and right shut-up person. I was afraid of the consequences this could bring because at that moment, I had no support from anyone. I had support from people who weren't religious, but there weren't many of them. My world revolved around religion, and you continued your life, so you didn't suffer for him. Over time, I developed panic syndrome, depression, and anxiety, and I had to take controlled medicine for many years. I stayed for 2 years doing psychological treatment, and when he stopped following you, it was like this, 1.5 years chasing 1.5 years. He followed me to my current house door. He passed by the car where we were going to go to events that he found that I was going to. He was going to have the event and stayed there looking. For everyone, he was a saint even when I took the threat tests. I took them to the elders as well. I'm so glad we've been able to talk about this. For a lot of years I did psychological treatment, and when he stopped following you it was like this, a year and a half of chasing and a year and a half of him following me to my current boyfriend's house door. He followed me to events that I was going to, and he stayed there looking for threats. Even when I took threat tests with the elders, he was a saint. After I did associate, I still talked to the elders, called them, and showed them the tests that I had. I had his print audio from print conversations. He says he threatened me, saying that I was going to wake up with my mouth full of ants. I said that kind of thing, and when I took it to the elders, they said they did not accept electronic tests because it could have forged my God from heaven. Then you were totally alone at the mercy of the situation. I'm so glad we were able to talk things through. After I shared my concerns, I spoke with the elders and showed them the printouts of our conversations. He admitted to making threats, saying that I was going to wake up with my mouth full of ants. I said things like that, and when I brought it up with the elders, they said they didn't accept electronic evidence because it could have been faked. So you were totally alone and at the mercy of that person, and you were already dating the same guy when you lost your virginity. Yes, I started dating, and after 2 months we started a relationship. You hadn't even had a single life. Then you didn't even live a single life. The only guy you made love to is your boyfriend, and he's still my husband today. You got married after a year, and in May he had a son. You want to have a couple of kids in the next couple of years. You're happy with your it was just one of those things. You were already dating the same guy when you lost your virginity. Yes, I started dating, and after about 2 months we started dating. You hadn't even lived a single life. Then you didn't even have a single life. The only guy you made love to was your boyfriend, who is now my husband. We got married a year and a half ago, and we have a son who is not yet born. We want to have a couple of kids in the next few years. Today you're happy with your husband, and I'm happy even in the house I was going to live with. But now they were new guests, new groomsmen, and a new party made a small ceremony just for our family and intimate friends. I didn't have the need. I don't know if it was the desire to marry a bride and have a ceremony that went through trauma, but I did something very small. We even had a registry lunch for our family and friends, and we traveled the same day. My dear husband, I'm so happy, even in a house I was going to live with someone else. But then, new guests, new groomsmen, and a new party made a small ceremony just for our family and close friends. I didn't feel the need to have a big wedding, and I'm not sure if it was because I wanted to marry a bride and have a ceremony, or if it was because I had gone through a difficult time. So we did something small. We had a registry lunch for our family and friends, and we traveled the same day. How did you manage to start your life outside the church, where you made new friends? Just as I started a relationship, my best friend was aware of my life and what had happened to me, and he didn't agree with religion. I never thought that having new friends and meeting new people, including during college, would be a problem. It's not like you don't look for college. I'm so happy to share how you rebuilt your life outside the church and made new friends. At the time, I was starting a relationship, and my best friend was aware of my life and what had happened to me. He didn't believe in religion, and he didn't think that it was necessary to have new friends or meet new people, including going to college. He thought that college was unnecessary. It's like a race against time to see if you'll stay good and not end up in a bad situation. He showed me that we can have a happy life here and that it's worth building something cool. Then he introduced me to a cycle of friends that I started leaving. I never had a right to give me a show fun, and then he was taking me to his friend's cycle and introducing me to. He was always looking for things he felt he was missing in the world. It was like a race against time, and he was determined to find something that would make his life complete. He showed me that we can have a happy life here and that we can create something wonderful together. Then he introduced me to his friends, and I started spending time with them. It was a fun experience, and it helped me see things differently. I started living a normal life as a young woman, and today, I'm grateful that my family accepted me. My mother and stepfather accepted me well because they saw the difference in treatment. They saw that my current husband is not a Jehovah's Witness, and he respected me. My mother saw how well I was doing, and she didn't worry about me. She knew I was doing well because I wasn't crying, and that was a sign of a good relationship. My mother never saw me screaming, and she never raised my voice. She was always affectionate and had a lot of conversations with me. I was always good, so she never saw me crying over anything he had done to me. She accepted my relationship, and I released myself from many things I had said. It was a general liberation because inside it, It's like a weight that holds you back from thinking freely. You start to believe things about other religions and homosexuals, and it slowly seeps into your mind. I can see how I used to think and how I live my life now. It's like I've been brainwashed. Today, religion doesn't play a role in my life, so I can think freely. It's like a weight has been lifted, and I'm finally able to see things as they truly are. I've met some incredible people, including my closest friends, who are homosexuals. It's liberating to realize that they're just people like anyone else. When you truly understand someone, you realize that they're not as different as you thought. Today, I'm feeling so happy. Music, music, music.